All right, hello and welcome everybody back to the Game Dev Show. We're here again with Andrew, Story, and Powell to talk about game development, AI, maybe some game design stuff, answer your questions. Oh, and I think we're going to talk about one of the new Unity packages, maybe dive a little bit into Unity 2020 as well. So welcome, thanks for joining us. Please hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and say hello in chat. And thank you guys for all coming out here. Good morning or evening, depending on where you're at.
Yeah, evening for me.
Yeah.
Perfectly nice morning here.
Your morning coffee and your evening coffee there, Jason?
Oh yeah. This is my third one for the day, which I don't know why I'm having so many.
Cool. So we've got, I think, quite a few different topics to talk about, but I also wanted to make sure that people can ask questions in chat. So if you have anything you wanted to ask me or the guys in chat, just drop it into the window there and I'll pop them up as they kind of appear. So I guess one of the first things I wanted to talk about was this AI stuff that's been going on. We were having a little bit of a discussion about it earlier, and you linked over this. Let me see if I can find the correct tab. This really cool video that I happened to see yesterday as well, which was about this AI texture generation. Have you seen this one, Jason?
Not this one in particular, but I have been keeping an eye on. I'm a big fan of the 2 Minute Papers channel, so I've been keeping an eye on the state of this technology for a while. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it seems kind of crazy. This one looks like it's a Blender plugin, and you give it your model and then the description and have it generate the textures for you.
Yeah, it's really those shot right there. I was pointing out you can see in the shadow what it's really doing is projecting a 2D image onto this 3D model, which is really clever. Doesn't texture the back, but Pavel, as you said, just rotate it and do it again, and it will.
Yeah, I feel like this is getting pretty damn close to just being able to hop in and just auto-generate. I mean, you can already do that, hop in and auto-generate buildings, but I think this would be a much better version of auto-generating sometime in the very near
The
future.
one that really blew my mind was one of the ones on 2 Minute Papers was the idea of applying what looks like a post-processing effect over the top, but it's actually an image generator that will completely retexture things. So you can have something that looks like, Russia in winter versus, Miami in summer from the exact same model and geometry through nothing more than applying post-processing and saying, that's a tree, that's a lamppost. What would a tree look like in this geometry, in this area? And it's fascinating. We're not quite there yet, but this is running almost real time. So it gets to the point where you're not just playing post-processing for color, but you can full on theme your game with the post-processing layer, which is crazy to me.
Yeah. It seems like obviously we're very early, and the textures that this is producing are really subpar. Nobody would look at these and be like, these are the textures I'm going to use for my shipped game in most cases. But for prototyping, for a quick visual look, to get some ideas, I mean, just idea generation. You see that with Midjourney or whatever. You want some concept art for a character, just start pumping away and fine tuning, and then suddenly you're like, I like that. That's the concept art I need because I can't draw it myself, but that's pretty much what I was thinking of.
Plus the conventional wisdom is two papers down the line. Always take whatever it is and look at it 2 papers down the line. And I'll never forget when Midjourney first came out, every single person who created had deformed hands and bow-eyed. And so we've gotten to the point where it's like, this is not usable. But again, just a short time later, all of a sudden it's making perfect faces. So yeah,
Hands
it'll
are
get
still
there.
challenging though.
A bit challenging, yeah. But the eyes are good. Nobody looks like they've got eyes pointing in different directions anymore, which is nice. So.
Yeah, I think that the hands will be probably, to me, the defining chapter of what defines AI at this point. The hands. It's always the hands.
Funnily enough, most artists will say the same thing. A lot of artists hide their hands, and you'll see comic books. There's a running joke. A lot of comic book artists will actually have the heroes have their hands out of frame, and so you'll see a lot of comic book covers, and they're just hands and feet are always obscured, just slightly outside of frame. It's funny.
And then it's similar to all the video game characters in helmets and full masks, so they don't have to do anything with their face.
I remember doing that. Just chop the head off and give them a helmet head instead. It's usually the trick. You just go all right, we'll slice them right here at the neck and put a new head on them with the helmet and call it good. They don't need hair anymore. Hair disappears once you get a helmet. So have you guys been playing with AI stuff? A lot of you guys played with the Chat GPT thing too.
Yeah.
I have had many a soulful conversation with Chat GPT. It's been pretty good. It's very entertaining how there's actually a lot of websites where they will guide you on how to make more engaging conversations. A lot of people don't realize it's not just the conversations you can have. You can ask it to change how it responds to you. So you can ask it to do things like answer me succinctly, and it won't give you the long formal conversations. It'll give you bullet points. Or you can say, speak to me like a 50s gangster. And it'll actually like change it'll add wise guy syntax throughout the whole lot. It's crazy. Like it's very funny how it can be very dynamic.
Oh, I gotta relog in.
I
Yeah, it's very cool.
I did attempt to make a Unity UI shader with it. Shader code is not something I'm super familiar with, and I've been trying to make a specific shader. So I got it to make me a shader. Every once in a while there was a bug, like it would declare a variable after it was used, something like that. But that's easy enough to fix. And it got to the point where it didn't do what it was supposed to do, but I understood where in the code it was trying to do that thing. And so I haven't dug into it beyond that, but now I got it to the point where, okay, I'm pretty sure I could get this working if I spent a little time, and it did all the stuff that I don't know how to do. So all the shader code stuff that I just don't know how to do, it did. Now I can get to the meat of it and fix it up, basically.
Yeah, I've got an artist friend of mine who's not a programmer really at all, but he used it to create a set of systems for a plant game where like water would over time things would be watered and they would grow and stuff, and he was able to sort of talk it through the process. You have to go multiple phases. It's not going to get it right the first time, and this is like goes back to what I was saying at day one. A lot of people are afraid this will sort of take over from programmers. It won't, because you have to know what questions you're asking, and even then you have to be able to fix whatever doesn't come up. But what it is going to do is it's going to be a great tool to speed your workflow up, because you can reason out how to solve problems, and then as long as you know what to do past that point, it can be pretty good. So I found it really good for first passes of things, or to pose rubber ducking effectively, being able to say, how should I do this way? And what's really great is I've asked it before, give me 3 other ways to do X. Just as if like, what might I do had I not gone with my first assumption? And that's been really fascinating, because they're not usually good suggestions, but it gives you enough of it's like having another programmer you can just talk to and say, throw me some random ideas and see what I come up with,
Yeah, I think the same goes to mathematical problems, yeah, because I have few graphics who are going into programming their own processing images, yeah, and they asked the ChatGPT to explain their advanced math to them simply. Yeah, so going step by step, learning some equations and advanced mathematics is quite easy with it.
That's a good point. I should start asking it some math questions every time I get confused. I have been using it for some of the like quaternion type stuff that I need to do. I constantly get confused on like rotating objects to do the right thing. So I just ask it now, and then it gives me example code, and I look at it and I'm like, oh, okay, that's right. That's the one that I need. It's been super handy for that. I did try making a full game with it though. It didn't go too well. Too well.
Yeah.
It wanted me to add in things many times over and over. It was a little bit confused on stuff, but it was a lot of fun. The best part, though,
I will say, but before someone points out the land mammal meme, yes, I'm very much aware that it is very good at being confidently wrong, and you shouldn't ever take anything it says with absolute certainty. But at the same time, the point is, like, I've heard that argument a few times where people are saying, oh, you can't trust it. It's like, we're comparing it to what? To Google? To the ultimate source of factual truth? No, it's like anytime you type anything into the internet, you're going to get information. It's not going to be vetted. And so the truth is, it's no different, in my opinion, to get information one another. There's a huge difference though, which is with AI, you can inspect the answer. If you get a comment online that gives you an answer, you have to either take it on faith or do multiple checks of research to find out the answer. If you ask GPT a question and it gives you an answer and you're dubious, you can ask it multiple questions to justify its answer, and you can find its flaws, which you cannot do with random people who are giving you answers on, Yahoo Answers or whatever is still out there. So I don't know. It's not perfect yet, but I truly believe within the next 10 years, it'll be the default way to ask questions is rather than searching 15 articles, there'll be some variation of asking the computer and having a dialogue with it.
Yeah, I think media literacy in general in all things is of utmost importance, and quite honestly, probably not something that a lot of people are fully up on as they should be. Just being able to understand what you're using, and that whether it's Wikipedia or Google Foo or this or that guy at the bar who's just talking to you and saying, I heard this, understanding that somebody might not be accurate is important, and understand how to parse that out and figure out the right answer, or at least get to the point where you're confident enough or not confident enough in what you're hearing. And this is a great example. I mean, this code, for example, it looks pretty legit to me. It's also very simple. Is it wrong? Is it right? Put it in there.
No, but even a great example, like, see, for example, it says forward multiplied by speed multiplied by time. There's an unnecessary vector by a float call there. So what you could do is you could put round brackets around speed and delta time and save yourself a calculation. So there are ways to, like, optimize things. But again, you're not looking at this to be perfect. And something that's really fun that someone pointed out is if it gives you code and it causes an error, or you can actually say, like, for example, Jason, ask it, can you make the above more optimized? Sometimes it'll actually just optimize itself. It's smart enough to know that,
Let's see if it can. I gave it a little bit of a clue on which part to optimize. I guess we'll find out.
It's being slow right now.
I've had it happen a couple of times. When I was recording a full video on it, there were a few times where it just totally hung and didn't know what to do and froze, and I had to restart.
My friend Nick actually crashed it. Yeah, he got a full on. I don't know how to answer that with like red errors and everything.
There's a also a cap, I think, to how much it will reply. Like, it won't give you too many characters, so some limit there. So you can't have it write a 20-page essay. You can have it write a 5 or 6 paragraph essay, but you're gonna have to take it bit by bit. What is interesting, I just played around with a blog post. I wrote a blog post. It's on infinitypbr.com if you want to actually read it. But I wrote a blog post with AI, and it was a 5-paragraph blog post, and then I had to expand on each part. Here, I'll link it to you, Jason, so you can share it out. Here we go. Oh, yeah, you found it. Hey, there's a pop-up. So it basically stems on what we were discussing in a group, in a game dev group a couple weeks ago. Why starting and finishing small projects is crucial. And there's a lot of videos on YouTube, and it's pretty. We've talked about it on the show here too. Just start and finish small things, something that I don't do myself, but everyone should. And so AI wrote this whole thing except for the last paragraph, and AI made the images for it as well. It's fine. It's nothing amazing, but maybe it has SEO built into it. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But I started with the 5 paragraphs, and then I said, okay, expand this into 2 more paragraphs, or this section, add a bit about XYZ, and it would do it, So it took all of
I will say, minutes. I personally originally really didn't like the idea. The truth is, I'm very much, I think information should be pointed, targeted, and purposeful. And I find that one of the great jokes about AI tools is we've invented digital students, where they'll regurgitate the internet, add unnecessary words, and add fluff, and it just makes giant paragraphs that mean nothing. And there is some merit to be saying that. But the truth is, I don't use it for that purpose. I don't like the idea of digital content produced by AI, because it is just going to do all of that. But what it is really good at is summarizing a topic with targeted questions. And I found asking it to describe something for me means it would give me a paragraph on something. And you can ask it to be more succinct as well. And once you've done that, you can then split it up into different portions and make it shorter. So it's good, but I don't want to live in a world where I'm reading articles generated by AI. I'd rather use it as a personal tool to get summary answers and to inspect on real-time purposes. Which is, again, I don't really read a lot of articles like that anyway for those reasons, because I do think the world is full of generated content already. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's just like with all the AI art stuff, it's about prototyping. Like, if I was really dedicated to that blog post, I would have rewritten it in my own voice. I would have added some funny bits. It would have sounded like me more. It would have been mine, because I would have spent another hour actually rewriting it. But I wouldn't have had to come up with all of the ideas necessarily. And maybe some of the ideas were new to me. Like, I think that's another interesting part. And I think this is where, like, the kids today who are going to write their essays with Chat GPT instead of their own brain, that's fine to me, so long as they're able to, again, media literacy here, understand what they're reading, figure out how to get better information, figure out how to make it their own, and then come up with something that, yes, they learn from, and yes, they're able to be intelligent about. And maybe they'll learn stuff in that process. And I think that that's where, you know, the AI can help you out. If I want to write something, a blog post about something that I, 50% understand, I could probably make a better blog post by using the AI to jumpstart that and give me a rough draft that I can then expand on, make it my own. And the parts that are new to me, I can learn about myself, and then maybe I learn something too.
It's also worth noting that, like, we're talking about trained models here, and a lot of people don't realize that, like, it can't access internet. Like, the current version of ChatGPT doesn't. If you ask it a question about searching the net, it'll tell you, I can't search the net. In fact, the model is based on, I think it's a year or two old, so it's actually kind of
2021.
dated information. Yeah. So that's fine. But in the future, we're going to live in a world where you can sit, like, the best example for me is the movie Her, where it opens with, can I read your emails? And your OS reads your emails and builds a computational model off of your own content. So once we get to the point where you're saying, like, consume all of my content and give me stuff that is directly relevant to what I'm saying or in my voice, it can be more valuable. I think the more general approach might be less useful.
Yeah. Yeah, we're early in this process. It's very exciting, very weird, and it's obvious the future is going to be different than the past has been. And certainly, it seems like nobody's talking about NFTs these days, so that's a win.
Well, what do you mean? The biggest
What?
NFTs just got released.
What?
I just saw the big announcement. Didn't you see that?
The Trump?
The Donald Trump thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, his big announcement was some NFTs that apparently sold out.
Of course. Of course they sold out.
Seems a little bit late to the NFT game, but yeah.
Right.
I'm really curious when this, like, I think it's kind of like Jason was talking about being 2 papers down. I wonder what, like, a decade or 2 down, what it's going to look like with the coding stuff. Is it, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it starts to get a lot more like a holodeck. Maybe not with the showing things and being able to interact physically with stuff, but on the just voice controlled or typing controlled code and world generation stuff. I feel like you may be able to say, like, hey, I want a fantasy world like this, modify it, add some dragons, add a cave over there, and then have it just kind of do a lot of that stuff for you.
Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me at all. Or
I imagine that a lot of the data they're getting from people just playing with it and asking it coding questions is building up that repository of FAQs. How many people ask how to move a character? Well, there's really, there's many ways to move a character, but there's a few common ways. So if I say I need a character to move, it knows exactly what to do. And if later on, as we get more advanced, I say, well, now I need the character to be able to fly, it will know exactly how to modify the code it's already written to enable that. And we will get to a point, I think, where the AI does a little bit more actual thinking, not human level thinking, but processing of where it can go in this matrix, and getting you closer and closer to where you don't have to think about the basic stuff. It would still be great for developers to understand the code they're reading, but why do we have to rewrite the same code over and over when our real job is to get a product out, to get a finished thing out? That's what we're really doing.
Do you guys think it'll actually write like human readable code like we're used to, or do you think it's going to be something very different in the future? I mean, obviously not the short term, but longer term future. Do you think it's going to be?
Well, it's gonna write what it was trained on, right? Which is going to be human code. And I think the truth is, the smarter down the line solution is going to be to have it actually write the assembly directly, right? Because then it can start doing a lot of fancier stuff. And at that stage, I imagine the equivalent of a 2-step compiler, where you ask the AI to write code, and then you ask the AI to take that code and turn it into assembly code, and then you ask it to optimize the assembly code, and then by the end of it, you end up with code that's unrecognizable, and that's good. That means it's more to the metal of what it's trying to do, but we'll be quite far down the road before we get to there.
At some point, those 3 steps will be done for you, right?
Literally, you'll ask it, like, write code to do X, and you'll end up with a bunch of machine code and going, I don't know what this does, but it's like done 8 levels of complication stuff.
Maybe you
there.
can dig into it and you can actually see the steps, but most people won't care.
Well, that's kind of been my favorite thing about it for people who haven't actually used it. When you ask it a coding question, it doesn't just give you the code; it writes a written description of what it's doing, and that to me is the like night and day difference. Because not only do you get the code, you get its thinking process, and that means as you read it through, you can go, actually, that's not what I meant, or you misinterpreted me there. Which, if you compare that to, quite frankly, working with real people, like. I've heard the argument that it's going to, like, not specifically this one, but talking about art and music, that it's going to replace musicians or it's going to replace artists. And I think that's such a hilariously bad take, because one of the best examples of this is, one of the takes is, when it comes to audio, people think, oh, it's going to replace jobs for creating music. Well, who does that already? The truth is, if you want to use music in your project these days, there is Epidemic Sound that will already give you seas of music generated by, not like AI, but by real people creating real music that's for less than $100 a year or something. So the truth is, you're not competing with those people. There's already, Unsplash is already free image generation, and it's not image generated, it is people go out and take really good pictures that are high resolution. And then there's loads of stock photo websites. We've already gotten to the point where content's democratized, so you're not up against that. The truth is, AI generation solves one job specifically more than anything else, which is concept art or concept creation of any kind. Which means if I want to hire somebody to make me something and I have to go, it's kind of like this, here's some mood board of what I'm looking for, we have to go back and forth 50 times to get to a conclusion of what I actually wanted in the first place. And honestly, if you care about your craft, you don't want to be wasting your time doing iterations. You talk to anybody on Fiverr, they hate the fact they have to do 12 or 14 different back and forths to figure out what they're going to do. If I could generate something that's 80% of what I want, but not handmade, and I could hand that directly to an artist and say, this is what I want in your style, then I've saved us both hassle, and they can get more work done and produce higher quality work. I truly think that it's going to make things better, not worse. Same with audio, right? There's already a sea of horrible corporate ukulele music, if that's what you want. Like, you can press generator buttons and get this already. AI is not going to replace musicians, because that's not the point of music, right? So I think people who are afraid of it should only be the people who are creating derivative enough works that AI can replace you. Otherwise, you should be fine, you know?
I think for me, all of this stuff, and it transcends beyond art industries as well, and art and whatnot. But the reality, for a lot of the jobs we do, I wonder, why do we want a person to do this job? Like, there are certain jobs, maybe as a teacher, yeah, we want humans to teach people in general, but even that, a lot of it, why we need a human to do that. But why do we need a human to create audio for rocks falling down a hill? Why do we need a human to do that? Like, what's the point? Is there a human out there who says, oh no, my drive in life is to create sound effects that, like, rocks falling down a hill, or just create more bullet sounds? I need to create more bullet sounds. That's what I love in life. Maybe there's somebody out there who really enjoys that, but I bet most people who do that kind of work, who are employed in, well, I make sound effects, there's probably other things in life that they would prefer to do. So if some technology can allow them to be more efficient, and so they have more time to do the things they really want to do in life, whatever that is, could be just sitting on their ass playing video games, then more power to them. I think it would be great if all of us only had to work 10 hours a week doing the things that we don't really want to do, and then we had the rest of the time to do all the things we did want to do. Spend time with our family, do some volunteer work, play with our animals, sit on our ass and play video games, and consume the things that the AI is producing, all that good stuff. I'm down with that. So I'm not so concerned personally about jobs being lost. I think people will figure out what to do after that, and more jobs will be created from all this stuff. And, Jason, to your point, more efficiency means people can get more stuff done with the same amount of time, which just means there's going to be more good stuff out there, and a whole lot more crap. And probably a lot of
that is definitely a concern. But here's my sort of misanthropic reply to that, which is, oh no, AI has arrived. We're going to get a bunch of shovelware mobile games alongside the existing shovelware mobile games. Yeah. Like the boat has already left on that approach. The truth is, like, we're already at the point, and it honestly, what frustrates me is more the lack of creativity in the AAA spaces, where you're getting 5 million carbon copy open world games, and it's just not interesting to me. So we're already seeing a resurgence in smaller games and narrative driven games and all of this stuff. So I think, if anything, when AI becomes so good that anybody can like roll a few dice and end up with good looking things, the putting the soul back into work, where people actually have a goal and intent behind the direction of what they're doing, will be back in style again. In the same way that, let's be real, we've got the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you've got a million high budget big movies with lots of good actors. You've got everything on paper: good directors, good actors, good cinematography, good music, and it's all a nice big wash of mauve, just grey all rightness, and it's fine, but it's not. There's no passion to it, right? There's not. It's not quite the same as things used to be. So I'm more than happy to see a world where, if all of that grunt work is out of the way and everybody can produce large open world whatevers, you have to go back to, okay, but if everyone can do it, then what's the defining factor? Well, let's start actually making good mechanics and story and whatever as a result.
Yeah. Honestly, the when we talk about movies and stuff, because I'm sure AI will be used in movies in many ways, I love the idea that somebody could, in the future, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, take their computer and make a movie with digital characters that are mostly believable. Maybe they buy digital characters off some art site, or they just generate them through some AI thing, and they can sit there and act out every single character. And some teenager in their room can create an epic movie that is just amazing, because it's a good story. It's a good, compelling story that people want to watch and want to experience. And they could do that because they have systems in place that allow them to do that. Digital filmmaking in general. I remember I was in high school and I spent all my money, like $5,000, on analog mixers and 2 super VHS decks so I could copy VHS and all this stuff. And I made these movies in like 45-minute movies in high school. I got an A in my class. Great job. And then the iMac came out and I said, $2,000, and I could have gotten something way better. And then YouTube came out, and now people can produce stuff on YouTube. So now teens can go out and produce stuff on YouTube. Now they do on TikTok instead. But all this enablement is just amazing to me. Yes, it's going to make certain people lose their jobs, I suppose, but it's going to be so much more interesting and cooler in the future, I think.
Yeah, like it breeds creativity. Like the bit that I think people forget, like this isn't new, right? These bang and bust cycles happen all the time. And the example for me that like I think epitomizes this is, you had democratization of art back in the form of like Macromedia Flash, and you had a whole bunch of Newgrounds artists creating cool stuff. Or the one that really stood out to me the most, you have people who can't make a full movie studio. So Machinima's born. You've got people playing Halo and just bobbing the heads of the characters while recording their screen and making Red versus Blue, one of my favorite narratives of any kind in the whole world. And it's just a bunch of people being creative and focusing on what they do best, the comedy, and not having to draw and render and storyboard and whatever. They just come up with the project. And so I think, yeah, any technology is going to be abused, but I think that in the right hands, it can lead to some very interesting stuff. Because from my experience, there's the kind of contract work I do, I'm often the one programmer whose sole job it is to take someone's art project and make it move in Unity, because they have the vision of what they want, but they just simply don't know how to do a timeline or do particle systems or make stuff work. And I think there's a lot of people out there who could make great stuff if you just take away a lot of that friction. And for people who are worried about losing their job doing that, the truth is, like, somebody still has to wrangle the AI. And so being the AI whisperer is just going to be the next job. Can you speak the right language to get it to do what you want? And as long as you're willing to upskill and move along the chain with everybody else, you'll be fine. And I like the challenge,
Yeah.
So this question popped up, and I think it'd be an interesting way to kind of take this discussion. But do you guys think that game developers or just software engineers in general should be diving more into AI stuff, or do you think that this is more of like a longer term down the road type thing? Because I mean, obviously, it's not generating all of the games now, but
Sure.
that may change in the next 2 to 3 years, do you guys think that people should be spending a good amount of time on getting into AI, or is it something that you would just spend like, a day, a month kind of loosely looking at, or
I would
where are
stay
you at?
abreast of it, stay on top of it. But I mean, clearly it's not ready for prime time right now, right? Not today. Maybe in a year, maybe in 6 months, maybe in 3 months.
But do you think people should just be investing heavily for when it is ready and kind of learning as much as possible, or do you think they should hold off on that until it's a little bit further down and focus more on just their normal development stuff?
I would say people should always look into things that would make them more efficient and better at their job. And this is one of those things that could make them more efficient and better at their job.
I'm going to be a contrarian. For all the positive stuff I've said, I'm going to say I think developers shouldn't, especially game developers, but for a very different reason. A lot of people who know me know that we talked before about my brand title, I guess, is a software architect, but I consider myself more recently a software philosopher because I spend more time thinking about the higher level stuff more than the practical stuff. And something that I think really worries me about this new brand of AI driven design and so on is there is a problem in game design. Well, actually, in any kind of design, but game is a very clear indication of this, where if you use a tool or existing system, like a character controller, if you buy a character controller on the asset store and it comes with a dash and a double jump, your game will inherently have a dash and a double jump because it's part of the system you've just bought, it's easy to implement, and it's high value for low work. And so what ends up happening is you start building a tool around the systems you've got, not the requirements of your project. And this happens anytime you use any system. If you're even an enterprise, if you get a back-end system, you will use the features of that system, and it's considered bad practice in design to do that. You should decide what you need, design the business rules around your project, and then use things that implement those solutions. Now, why did I bring this up in relation to AI? Well, AI, especially things like GitHub Copilot, finish your sentences for you. That is not the same thing. If I'm writing create character controller and the next line is, oh, here's a character controller with a double jump and a dash, you'll be like, yeah, okay, why not? Sure. And you'll just keep nexting your way through your application. And I think it's not about completion your code or optimization or automation or any of that. What you're doing is you're removing the actual act of critically creating things and choosing purpose in your design. And that's what scares me, because it should be used critically as a tool to say, I've made a decision. Here's a user requirement. Here's a feature that would make my game better. And then here's a way for me to use the tool to get that exact thing, which is why I don't use Copilot, because the idea of it completing my thoughts for me means it's the phrase is wag the dog. It will end up controlling my decision making, not the other way around. And so I like using GPT because it's a thing on the side I can talk to. It is not directly in my code base correcting and changing as I go. And the middle ground for me is something like Writer, which offers autocompletes to fix things and says, hey, by the way, did you know there's a better way to do this? That I can live with. But I think people have to be very, very careful to avoid the difference between tooling for automation and efficiency and tooling for creativity, where you let it drive your decision making. So that's where my line is. And so my short answer is no, I don't think developers should lean into it. I think they should treat it like a thing over here that's fun to keep an eye on, but be very careful about using it.
What about for NPC AI? And actually, before you answer that, I want to make sure that everybody who's watching has already hit the thumbs up button and subscribed. If you haven't, make sure that you do that. And if you got questions, drop them in chat because we'll start taking those too. But what about for NPC AI? Because I feel like out of all of the things I can see, using some machine learning AI stuff for that seems like it makes more sense. It's not game generation. It's not so much content generation, but it's more that system development. I mean, it's kind of content because it's the way that the AI is thinking. But do you guys think
because I'm going to be contrarian again? I want everyone else to answer first because I also disagree on using it there too, but for different reasons.
Right. Anybody else have thoughts on
it? For me, I think I would go with what Jason said. Jason said earlier. Yeah, because it depends on the game. If your game is story-based and you will have AI generate your NPCs, it won't be going with your design thinking, with the design of the story. Yeah, of course, we can give some boundaries to what it can say or can't say, but we are still living in too much space. Yeah, so it always depends. If you are creating open game when everything can happen, so simulating a world, then yeah, it can be NPC, because you're simulating the world. If you can give him some kind of character, some kind of histories and so on, then yeah. But if you are going with story-based games, then no, because we want to have this design of characters, design of the story based on what we thought about. Yeah, so it's always the line what we are creating, and if we first should think about design, thinking what we want to have in the games, what hooks we want to have, and then use the tools that we can. If we want to have characters that can go role play totally, then yeah, but most of the cases, no.
So I would say I might be similar to that idea. I think if it's important, then less AI. If it's less important, then more AI would be fine. What I'm thinking with NPCs is, there's a couple ways of looking at it. One, if we think about like use of assets in a 3D or a AAA game, a lot of times people will buy stuff from the asset store and put it in the background of their AAA game, and that happens. You'll see some rocks or a barrel that's in the background. Nobody touches it. It's just there. And they left it in because why replace it? But they replace all their prototyping stuff from the asset store with stuff they created because they're a AAA game. That's what they do. In the similar vein, if your NPCs are just walking around and they're not being interacted with, or they're just doing basic stuff, then if an AI can get you what you need and it saved you an hour of coding, then hey, you're done. And that's fine because it's less important. I would say, though, that there is interesting opportunities when it comes to designing more advanced AIs without having to, perhaps killing jobs, hire a writer. Like if you can get Chat GPT to say, hey, imagine a character that has this background, this bio that you wrote. They are a pirate. They're 35 years old. They hate the world, blah, blah, blah. Imagine they were asked, where should we go today? What would they say? And you could feed into the AI a whole bunch of basically dialogue prompts that your character might give, and it would give you back out the text. Now that's not necessarily the AI logic, but it's the AI content or the NPC logic, but the NPC content where the AI can drive that. I don't necessarily think we're ready for real-time AI driving the dialogue right there. That seems dangerous. But certainly for giving you stuff that and just speeding up the development of various processes, I think we're at a point where there is valid use cases for AI. It's very small, but in those cases where it's not important or where it can help you do something that would otherwise take you a lot of time and get you to a better position than you would have yourself, such as writing dialogue, I think we're good there.
So before you jump in, Story, because I think you're gonna have a good.
Oh yeah, I have a few things to say.
My thought on this in general was that it's really useful for the skill type games that are very hard to create a bot for. Things where they're trying to do some physics interaction and balance a ball or hit a ball back and forth, that type of stuff, where you can train it relatively easily with a repeatable thing. And then actually recreate it without having to cheat, without having to because for me personally, like coding a bot that can balance a ball and bounce it around and stuff is difficult because there's a lot of math involved that I barely understand, right? I just get confused, and it'd be easier for those. But I feel like I kind of agree with you guys that in general with the bigger stuff, it's just not quite anywhere, or not even close to ready for handling the core stuff of a game, like the big stuff. You can do little things, but or like I said, the more physics based, balancey, challengey type games where you just need a bot to battle against, that kind of stuff. But I don't see it running the whole AI for a big game yet, which means that it'll probably start happening in like the next 3 months. Like there'll be some big game that's launched all running on AI or something, right? So what about you, Jason? Go ahead.
So just to be extra contrarian, I feel dangerous today. I don't just dislike it; I absolutely despise the idea. I hate it with a burning, soul-filled passion because I truly believe the point of AI and the point of AI in a game and the point of AI tools as we're describing them are diametrically opposed. They're fundamentally at odds with each other. What I mean by this is I think too many people are focused on realism and reality as if it's an inherent good. And what I mean by that is if you jump in a video game and you have the perfect realistic jump in a video game, that doesn't make the game better. I mean, the whole point is we don't look for reality in our games. But the problem I have is I remember a while ago there was the uproar on Twitter when a lot of game designers came out and said, you know, we're lying to you, right? Like we all agree your last bullet always does more damage. The enemies always miss you the first time on purpose. Your health bar is never really as much or as low as you think it is, and it's like it's game feel. Like there's a general point is that games are meant to give you an experience. They're not meant to replicate reality. And when it comes to AI that's very clever is actually not what you want. Because if you're programming AI, it is very easy to make a perfect AI. Just tell it exactly where the player is at all times, and it's a genius. It'll always get perfect shots all of the time. The hard part is making something realistically bad. And the truth is, if you make an AI which makes decisions, you're making something which is unreliable. As Powell said, for simulations, fine. But for 99.9% of games, that's not the case. What you want is behavior that's repeatable. Because what's happening is, the player experience is I am learning about the world through context cues. I'm figuring out how the world works, and I'm making plans around it. There's a reason why, and this probably surprises people if you think about it. In every stealth game you've ever played, the AI is like, I think they're gone now. I'm going to go back to my routine. That's not arbitrary, and that's not just fun flavor text. That is a game mechanic cue to tell you that the systems have reset. There is a lot of this where characters are doing this to give you repeatability in the actions you're performing so the game makes sense. So when it comes to AI, even the clever AIs like in Horizon, the AI there is very smart because we're going through like state machines are really basic all the way up to behavior trees to multi-tiered behavior trees and all this. But the difference is, unlike an AI generated AI, the point with the behavior tree is it's a set of states, and then you use the equivalent of A-star pathfinding to create a path saying, given this, how do you get from here to here? In other words, kill enemy where you are, how do you do that? And it'll go, okay, to do that I could use a sword, I could use a bow, they're this far away, maybe I'll do this. But the difference is it's repeatable. It's the point where it's making decisions that you as a player can learn. And the better you get at the game, the better you can intuit what it's doing. If you don't do that and you use generative anything, you end up in a world where the player cannot make plans that can reliably work out. And that is going to ruin games because players, that's not why people play games. You play for the power fantasy of being able to solve and outthink your opponent. Like, it is fun playing online games and being bested by a better player, but it is very different if you're bidding an AI outpacing you all the time and you have no chance to compete with it. Like, I don't see a world where it's going to be more fun, and that's only on the mechanical side of it. If you get to narrative, I have a whole issue with that separately, which is narratives are about purpose. I truly believe that any character you put in a game should serve some intrinsic purpose. I'm a big fan of the Dan Harmon story circle approach, where every single scenario should be status quo, something changes, you go through the process, and like you have a fall, you improve, you return back to the base again with some change to your persona or what's going on. And the truth is, if you have AI characters that are driven by you're vaguely a salty sea pirate and you're going to be in the bar and you can be NPC dialogue, the problem is that's fine. You could fill the world with that. But what you've got there is conceptual noise, because as a creator, you haven't chosen an adventure for that person to have. And I think you can feel it, because if you trace the game flow of a game that's been hand paced for a narrative, and I'm not saying like a track, I'm not saying you have to put someone on a static track, but like, if you build a world where the characters are meant to be downtrodden because you're in the lower city, and then in the upper city you've got different characters with more aristocratic or whatever, you can arbitrarily fill them with people that fill those roles. But if you craft that, you as a creator can actively like sell a message and structurally place them to have a flow that gives the player an experience of going through a village and doing whatever. Could you use that as a baseline? Sure. Like, for example, I'm a huge fan of pressing generate on an AI generator and then looking through multiple cycles, stopping on one of them, deleting a few pieces and crafting something from what you've got and using it to help your workflow. But the idea of just handing off characterization, that's like making a stage play and having a bunch of actors come in and go, you're a talented actor. You've done 50 pirates before. Play the pirate in my new play. Just go ahead. Like, I don't know what you do, but like, just sit in the back and be a pirate. It's like, whatever that story is, it's not going to be crafted for you as an audience. It's going to just be characters saying things vaguely associated to what their character would do. And that's soulless to me. Like, I don't want to play a game if I don't feel like the creator is actively trying to say something to me or engage with me or the point of a story, you know?
It's funny because it sounds like probably 95% of NPCs in an MMO. Right? That's what they are.
Which is why I don't play MMOs, right?
Yeah, like most of them, unless you're on that, that epic quest line, the main story thing, a lot of it's exactly like that. And those probably could just be randomly generated. You just go,
yeah, but do you want that? Like,
to them.
as much as it's a bit cynical, but the truth is, when you've got those know nothing NPCs in an MMO, like I used to play a few back in the day, but you know when a character is not meant to be important because you walk up to them and they say the one or two lines and you move on. If every character is going to infinitely spin you a yarn of their life story of 500 years of history and their family and children, everyone is vaguely interesting, but what's important and what's relevant to the story you're experiencing, you know what I mean? You can get lost forever chatting to all the people in the local town bar, but they're all meant to mean nothing. And I think having the declarative structure of the important character story, I think, is important. I think you'll lead to a mismatch where a lot of people will just get stuck in this loops of nothingness in their experience,
Right. I do think it will be interesting if we get to a point where AI systems themselves could be utilized in games and in other places too, but specifically games here. What I'm thinking is like, okay, you got all these NPCs giving you quests. It's stale, it's boring. Everyone gets the same quests. Could we devise an AI system that takes in the events of the game and understands to some mathematical degree what's happening and says, okay, well, we need to give the player opportunities for more adventure, more experience, or more whatever. So let's create some new quests that are based on the status of the game. So, two players going up to the same NPC might have very different experiences with that NPC at the exact same point in the game because one of those players did a dungeon earlier. The other player hasn't done that dungeon yet. Therefore, the AI system says, "Ooh, the other player hasn't done this dungeon. I can throw in this side quest to the old dungeon, go back to the dungeon and do something else or whatever." And they could actually manipulate almost the game itself a little bit within some reasonable boundaries to make it just more dynamic and interesting without the developer necessarily having to code every single possibility, which is something they would have to do today, I think. Maybe it could create some sort of, flexibility, have some flexibility within the sandbox of creating some believable quests, side quests, small side quests.
So again, I can meet you halfway in that the idea of using it to create a backstory and lore for a character is very fascinating. Like, I think Dwarf Fortress is one of the most interesting conceptual technical projects in the world because the idea of pressing play on a game and 100 years of history has been generated and like the bones of the creatures under the ground actively had a fight 60 years ago that you could go back through time and see is great. And the idea of a game where you have a character and they actually have children and a family and a backlog, and they used to work at the local mine and they worked there for 6 years until they got fired because they came to work drunk one time, and you didn't write all of that and it's all built into a world, is fantastic. But I think there's a fundamental difference between building the lore background and the characterization versus writing the story. If you use it to build the characters and then you as the creator take that background noise and then go, right, it's like the MacGuffin, right? You can take a game and put it in a spaceship, and as long as you're telling a good story on a spaceship, I don't care that it's like generic spaceship. You could move that to a different place and it doesn't matter. The example for me is Disco Elysium was originally a space game, and they ended up setting it in, not a space game as like Reykjavik, the whole fake thing. But the point is, the theming doesn't matter insofar as if you use the AI to generate the background themes and the lore in the background, fine. But I want the actual story I play to feel like somebody has made a choice for me. They're trying to get me to engage with the world and story. The problem I have is when my minute-to-minute experience is driven by AI yes-anding me in an infinite loop of just trying to keep me engaged enough to talk to the local character, that's depressing to me.
I think it'll keep you engaged enough to buy the next microtransaction. More like
That is the
what
point,
will
isn't it?
happen. All right, now that we got AI in here, can you optimize for revenue, please?
Yeah.
Let's go tell Chat GPT.
You go to every bar and they try to sell you the latest fishing rod or whatever, and it's like they're actually selling you their stuff that they're generating on the fly to sell you.
So there was a super chat that came in a while ago. It kind of disappeared, but I wanted to pop it up. I just retyped it out. There was an issue with the chat. It was a very simple one. Does Jason Story have any plans to make more videos in the foreseeable future?
Can I
He
answer that?
does.
Just
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
go
no,
ahead,
okay.
Andrew. What are you thinking here?
Andrew can take over my channel for me. No, I do, truly, I do. I specifically have earmarked starting some stuff in January. It's near the end of the year. I'm not going to be doing anything, to be brutally honest. So I have 3 videos planned for February, and I do have a bunch of stuff in the works. But I've got some actual work stuff coming up. In fact, I was saying to the guys just before the call, I'm starting a project in January that's actually working on a game, consulting with some stuff and doing some audio stuff, and so I've been distracted with work things. Although it's given me a lot of research I've been doing recently, which is why game design is very much in my head at the moment. But as far as the actual programming stuff goes, yes, I have more videos planned. Though, as a word of warning, my interest right now is in productivity and automation stuff, and so kind of like with Warped Imagination channel, he does videos on whatever he's interested in, and so the truth is, if I am going to do more videos, it's probably not going to be programming tutorials initially. It's going to be the fun stuff I'm enjoying right now, note-taking, automation, and project management, and we'll get back to coding stuff once I'm back in that mindset again. So
Nice. Well, that would be cool to see when you're building. You have to share some of the game stuff once you're able to too. I
Yeah.
assume there's probably some NDAs and stuff now, but whenever you get
Always.
the opportunity, it'd be cool to see what it is you're working on. Talk a little bit about it. So let's hit a couple more questions real quick. Can you make a detailed video about quaternions? You want to do that one, Jason? Because I have no.
I actually in my Discord as a joke we asked GPT explain quaternions to a 5-year-old, and so there you go, try that. That's what we did.
It worked.
That is probably
it used the metaphor of it's like a box that it was like a ball it was rotating. It was pretty good. It had a very good, interesting metaphor.
There was a question about using Rust in Unity. Is that a thing? Is that something you can do now? It says I'm
No
not
idea.
starting a Rust discussion, but if you guys experience using the Rust language ICM Unity, I assume that was supposed to be in Unity. I'm not really sure. I was just curious if that was something that I had missed out on and didn't know about. Doesn't sound like it, but if it is, be curious. And then there was another question about, and this is more of a question, I think, just a general, like, how do you take a concept into code? But it said, hello, gents. Can you explain to me, how do you think and plan a scene, then execute it in code? How do you even start? Like, how do you, which to me means like, how do you go from, I've got this idea of I want this game. And when I think of it in a scene, think of like a small, I'm thinking like a 1-level game. And how do I start actually writing the code? And for me, it's probably different for each of us, but I personally like to put in the objects that are moving around, the things that are going to move and interact, and just start popping those into my game, even with just some placeholders or whatever I've got, and then start writing the code right there at whatever the thing the player is controlling and moving around. And then I just kind of build up from there. It depends a lot on the game, obviously. Like some types of games can be way different than that, but a general, just standard, not too complicated game, I start with the thing that the player is going to control and move around, start putting that in, and then just start expanding and then see kind of where it goes. So a lot of the time I can kind of project it in my head exactly where it's going to go because I've done it enough times. But the actual process, when I don't know what I'm going to do and I don't know the next step, that's where I start. What about you guys? Anybody got some tips or advice or just something you could say here?
Baby steps for me. Lots of baby steps. Check it. Does it work? All right, let me add the next small thing. And then periodically go back and refactor everything. And sometimes go back and change a lot of stuff because something else changed. So baby steps for me. But yeah, starting with, oftentimes get the player moving around in whatever fashion that is. That's the first step. Can I move? And then can I do the main thing? If it's being bad guys, put a bad guy in there. Or if it's another thing that the player can do, put that in there and work on that. And oftentimes for me, especially for larger games like an RPG or something, things are like, it's not just the enemy. It's also this, it's also that. It's a lot of different things. And so you have to kind of move in one direction. Okay, then move in another one and then tie them together. And it's just sort of building blocks. But each for me is just a baby step. One thing here, one thing there. And trying not to do too much at once, because that's a good way to get myself very confused.
Yeah, I think the same. I'm mostly starting with something simple. I prefer to start with something that's fun. Yeah, the mechanic that's fun and easy to make, just to get a hang of what the game will be about. Yeah, so if it's simply some type of movement or some type of shooting, if I'm making a shooting game, or in VR, if I know that I'm making some kind of gimmick with my hand controller, so with something, I'm starting with it. But as you said, start it small, make baby steps with it, test it, debug it, and then build upon it.
Yeah, I agree that I've had a hard time trying to figure out how to phrase this for a while, and it really jumped out at me recently with the channel Continuous Delivery. He said something that really stood out to me in his, I think it's most recent video on behavior-driven development. And again, the word just really like resonated with me, which is from development, I really latched on to the idea of test-driven development because it felt natural and satisfying to work from this technical, small, bite-sized steps. But there was always something wrong with that for game development, which I couldn't really put my finger on. And I finally figured out what it was once I learned about the differences between London versus Chicago style testing, which is, to go back to the video on continuous delivery, the quote he said was, "Behavior-driven design is different because we use the language of the problem rather than the language of the solution." And that really stood out to me because what it means is, to answer your question, how do you start? It's very tempting to go down this mental rabbit hole of, I'm going to make a character needs to move, movement requires rigid bodies require physics, so I'm going to need to make a physics system, and all of a sudden you're like 10 steps removed because you're dealing with the language of the solution. Rather than the language of the problem. You're thinking in terms of rigid bodies when what you're really trying to do is make a character jump. And so to answer your question, when you're trying to build a scene, you think from the language of, the problem you're solving. So what I like to do is ask myself the simplest, I want to test X. I want to load a scene. Scene.load. Did it work? Cool. I want to press space and make the thing jump. Make a method called jump, have it print a log message that says I did a jump, and just reason your way through it step by step and make sure that every line of code you write is directly resolving to to the actual problem that you're doing, not the solution outcome that you're looking for. So yeah, same thing. I very much agree. Small bite-sized steps move forward, but I think there's a very strong distinction. Don't just make steps in the direction, make steps in the direction that visibly solves the actual problem, not the solution. So don't start writing your JSON file saver. Start with, I want to save a game. Well, what am I saving? Make a thing, make it appear, do different, and then saving should be like 80 steps down the line once you already have the stuff, it's doing things, and now it's worth saving. If you're generating a map, don't start by building a CSV file reader that reads things. Start by doing a map, making a map generate data, then you have data, now it's worth saving the data. So small steps in the direction, starting from the problem down to the solution.
You mentioned jumping a second ago, and there was a question that popped up earlier. I figured we may as well answer this because we probably have an easy answer to it. There's somebody working on a prototype, and they have a problem. And this is something that other people have talked about too, where they're running into issues where everything works fine in the editor, but when they actually build the game, this one actually says when they launch the editor and hold space, it immediately jumps too high. I think they said that when they build, they get similar things. My guess here was that they're probably doing something related to the frame rate and the time.delta time here. And on that initial frame, it's taking a long time. So that time.delta time value is probably large, and then multiplying their jump force and making them go flying really high. And you want to make sure that if that is the case, it may not be the case, but if you're using the rigid bodies and adding force, you don't want to be adding time as well. You don't want to use that in those rigid body calls. Generally at all. I don't know. There's probably something in there where you use time, but I can't think of it offhand. You guys have any other ideas for what might be causing this weird jump though?
Fixed update maybe rather than normal update. Maybe there's code is in the wrong place for calculating input, handling that.
Or getting called twice too. Add a debug log, just see if it's happening once or more than once. It could be that something's calling it more than one time in that first frame for some reason.
Yeah, if they're holding space, I just as a check to make sure it's not is key down or on key down. You should be on key down, so it only happens once rather than if it's being held. Could be adding more force.
Hopefully that helps a little bit. Let's see if we had any other. I don't know if there were any other questions to answer. So, Andrew, you had something you shared earlier. You want to pop that up or I'll pop that up real quick and we can talk about it.
Which thing did I share? I've got so many.
The new package.
Oh, which new package?
Well, let's see if we can find it.
Let's
this
see.
one right here.
It's a good sign when you're creating so much work you can't even remember which of the fantastic things you've made.
Well, this is because I was like, is it one of mine? No, the spline package. I saw this recently and I haven't used it because I don't use the latest version of Unity because first of all, I want to avoid any bugs, but also because with asset store production, you got to use older versions. But I saw this and thought immediately, well, that looks very interesting for a lot of different use cases. A spline tool built into the editor or a package that you can download and have it built into the editor. I know there's spline tools probably on the asset store that do very similar things, but having things built in is always fun. It just looked very interesting and powerful for making things like fences that are organic and placing things on the ground, doing roads. I'm sure, Pavel, you probably have a lot more ideas on this in regards to environments.
Yeah, spline tools are always fun to use. To be truthful, I don't like the implementation that the Unity used now. It's quite powerful and gives big possibilities. But for me, the biggest problem with it, it's not easily extensible. So you can't easily add it upon it. Yeah, you have to have quite a big knowledge of programming to give additional. Yeah, and until Unity gives more samples with using it, it will be a little problematic for non-programmers. Yeah, but for programmers, yeah, it's great stuff when it is matured. Because for me, it's not still matured enough. Yeah, but if someone wants to make something with splines, I would gladly tell to try it out, check how it's done, because you can check all the code, check how you can expand it. But yeah, I'm not so keen to moving from my own splines to this one. Yeah, I wanted to. I was checking it out from alpha moment and up to this now, but it's not there yet. I see
You've
too many
written
problems.
your own, right?
Yeah, I have my own written. I have my second version written already, which was supposed to be based on this, but I had to scrap the code and write it myself. Yeah. So
I
the
just wanted to
new
give
version.
context for the people who like this isn't good enough. Like,
So
it's definitely if you're writing your own, you can have much higher requirements.
Yeah. So I wrote my code that I can one day move to it back, but for now I prefer my own solutions, and we will be releasing them in the new assets. But yeah, it's good beginning, but it's still a long way till it's viable for the development of the games. Yeah. For
And
let's
if you want
say,
either side, by the way,
yeah,
if you're new, like if you're like me and very bad at maths, and you're not able to write your own spline systems, then the two solutions either side. If you want to learn the basics, there's a fantastic series on cat-like coding, which will go through the basics of how to make your own spline system and will teach you the general idea of how it works and how it interpolates between things. But at the other end of the spectrum, check out Freya Homer's most recent video, which goes into vivid detail on splines that reminds me why I don't go near splines too much, because they're far too complicated and scary for me from a math perspective.
I watched that one. I was all good for like the first 20 minutes, and then I started.
It just goes off a cliff, right? It starts out with just some dots in space. All of a sudden, it's like, and I'm lost. I'm stepping out of here.
Start appearing, and I'm like, I don't know what any of these things mean, but it looks cool. I learned a lot, but yeah, it's definitely. I was the same boat. I was like, well, this is why I don't do this. This shit is confusing the hell out of me. But
and to be truthful, yeah, I think that Unity tool for you creating your own, let's say for making paths for moving objects, for making some kinds of adding objects around the spline, it's okay. But if you want to create your own meshes with this spline, then for me, nope, because you need this additional math knowledge to know how to use it. Yeah, because for example, the example that Unity uses to create a road from the spline, yeah, it mostly takes the spline and wraps the road around it. And it looks okay for simple road, but if the road has a big angle, the two vertices at the moment when it is a big angle, it will cross. Yeah, because mostly for roads you should have one spline, take the tangent of the spline, move it separately, have two splines work together, and then make a mesh out of it. If you don't, then the road vertices will break. And this is example that is there in the samples. Yeah.
this is reminding me of Freya's video.
Yeah,
like
the bit that I specifically remember was that, yeah, like it is very interesting though, because maths can be very elegant, but it just certainly falls into that category of there's dots, lines between the dot, or dots between the two, make your line, but then the how far apart each dot is represents, because it's different if you're just drawing a line. If you're generating geometry, then you want things to be equally spaced, and there's a lot of other stuff going on. So yeah, it's well past the point where it's easy to use. If you're trying to make things like a road and it works correctly, it's like it gets more complicated.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm gonna drop that one off as soon as I find my mouse. And then, did you guys have any other things you wanted to talk about today? Or you want to wrap it up?
The only thing I would say is I did want to briefly mention that I've been playing a few more games recently, like I said, and one that I started and finished was Justin Roiland's new game, the High on Life. That I found very interesting. So for people who haven't seen it, his last game was Trover Saves the Universe. And what's very interesting to me is Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon are basically the brains behind Rick and Morty. And they both approach it from a different place. So Justin Roiland has the irreverent, silly humor, and then Dan Harmon has the kind of the depressing philosophical debates and conversations, and that's kind of combined makes for a really great story. And then, but separately, I think you can start to see some of the missteps where one of them misses parts of the other, right? And the problem I used to have with Trover was it was a story that was being told in a game engine rather than a game that's trying to be funny, right? And I think the fundamental difference is Borderlands is a game with comedy elements, while all of the games so far from this studio are a story that happens in a game engine. Now, that isn't to say this latest one is actually a very good game. It is fun to play, but there's numerous instances where it being a game overrode, or it being a story overrode the fact that it was a game. And it's very interesting from a game analysis perspective, because there's a couple of things in it that really stood out to me. Like, you've got a right-click ability, which does sort of a special power, and on multiple occasions, the game reminded me it had a right-click ability to use, because it's like the gun is a talking gun and says, hey, use my other ability. And that sounds funny at first, but in practical terms, it is playing up the narrative in telling me how to play the game rather than letting me play the game, right? And there's lots of little examples of this where narratively it drives you based on the story it wants to tell you, not on the gameplay that you're experiencing. It's just fascinating. I think from a game analysis perspective, it is very interesting how you can tell the difference between a story that's in a game engine versus a game that's, telling you a story.
Yeah, Rick and Morty, that was very much that story in the game engine too. I enjoyed it though.
Yeah, it's very fun.
Yeah.
And the art, they really up the art on this, like compared
This
to
looks
Trover's.
great. Yeah,
It's very visually impressive.
I've got to find a little bit of time where I can play some. How long did it take to play through this whole thing?
15 hours, and I probably got about 85% of the way through the game. And to be honest, I'm not going to 100%. I 100%ed Trover. I'm not going to 100% this for various game design reasons that boil down to. I played the Ratchet and Clank game and nearly finished. I got about 95% on that too, and I didn't finish it for the same reason. When you've got a realistic art style like this, you blur the lines between what is or isn't foreground or walkable or so on. And so what's really frustrating is I like collectathon games. I like collecting everything. But the game is designed in such a way that it's very unclear as to what is or isn't part of the game or not. And so it doesn't feel like a reward that I've spotted all the collectibles. It feels like I just haven't dry humped all the surfaces enough to find the right ones. And it's not rewarding from a play perspective. So I got a lot of them. I got 85% or so, but I'm not going to complete the whole thing for that reason.
Okay, do you have to collect them all?
No, it was just me. I just normally like to. I normally like to, because I like exploration games. I like to see what I can do. But I hit so many invisible walls. I glitched out of the map 3 or 4 times. It feels like the act of exploring at numerous times was not rewarded, and other times it's a whole different rant I could give. But yeah, it's a good game. It feels like at its core, it's an exploration game that actively disincentivizes exploration for numerous reasons, and that frustrates me.
Interesting. Oh, I'm definitely going to have to give this thing a try.
I think the art style is really cool in that.
It's very cool, yeah. And it is like, it's very satisfying having like the gun is like floppy, and it's kind of a weird, but it's sort of fun visual thing that you just don't see that very often.
It's very cool. And Andrew, you just sent me, is that another Humble Bundle link?
This is for those people who keep talking about Unreal in the chat. This is for them. Nature Manufacturer and I have teamed up for this epic.
I'm gonna have to buy some more. God damn. Okay, let me log in.
This is for Unreal only. So this is for Unreal.
Still, I'm gonna have to get it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And so you get a whole bunch of environments and a whole bunch of characters to fill and populate those environments all at once.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Especially as of Unreal 5.1, you can use finally Nanite and with nature assets and at least so you can have everything working fast.
That is very cool. I'm going to drop the link in the chat and the description. Infinity PBR and sure.
Yeah. Actually, I love seeing what people make with my stuff. I mean, I think that's just one of the joys of it, really. And I've got another story I can talk about that recently that I discovered. But the Unreal is not something I'm super familiar with. It gives me a headache when I try to use it, to be honest. And I've got Oliver, who's been managing the Unreal store, and he's been doing a wonderful job. But I can't wait to see what Unreal people do with these assets. If you do anything with, even if it's just a quick little thing, please come to the Discord. And I'm sure Pavel probably the same for both of our Discords, and show us, because I would just love to see what you're doing, especially if you're using Nanite or other things like that. Yeah.
Oh, 1 second. I got a technical problem again. Ow!
Technical problems. Never.
Electrocuted by my computer. That's always good.
Oh, no, don't do that.
Touch it and it shocks the shit out of you. That's a good sign. Now, a mouse driver, something's going on. It keeps losing the mouse randomly just throughout the day. No consistency to it.
I think your mouse doesn't have enough LEDs. I think that's the problem. You need to have a mouse that's got more RGB in your mouse.
That's probably the issue. I don't have any RGBs on my desk except for the actual fans in there. So
I know your background is so corporate these days. Now that you're in an office, oh my gosh.
It's actually just because I haven't plugged in all the RGB lights yet. I still have a whole stack of them. I gotta get it all figured out. But
Someone in the chat asked if it's appropriate or acceptable to use the Humble Bundle in Unity. Yes, I mean if you can convert them over, sure. It's going to take some work to do that, so it's up to you. All this stuff is available on the asset store as well, and is often on sale. I think a lot of the Infinity PBR stuff will be on sale starting Monday, if I'm allowed to spoil that.
The nature manufactured assets will also be on sale.
Yeah, so there's a New Year sale coming up, I think starting Monday, that these will be on sale. But yes, you can convert them if you really want. The Discord link for my Discord is on infinitypbr.com in the top right button of that if you want to get that link. So definitely join the Discord. It's a fun Discord. All of the Discords are fun, but there's people who talk and enjoy conversations, so that's fun. I wanted to point out, this is a fun aside story. Roberta Williams, they did the old what games did they do a long time ago? Sierra Online, all of those things. So they're working on a new game, and for some reason I can't. Colossal Cave, that's it. And they just released their trailer. I'm trying to find it. There it is. Game. Colossal Cave 3d.com. They just released their trailer, and I was very pleased. There's a link to their site. I was very pleased to see in the trailer some familiar characters, at least one familiar character there. The Cobra Snake. And I'm
picturing that Leonardo DiCaprio meme where you're just pointing at the TV. It's like, yeah, that's fine. I know that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I did. And so I went to their Discord and thanked them for using the character. But it's great to see, like I said, it's great to see the stuff actually used in games. Like when people post in the showcase channel on the Discord something that they've been doing, I love seeing that. And to see it in projects that are being used by industry legends, that's just phenomenal as well. And I think at one point I'm pretty sure I saw some of my stuff in the guy who did Ultima. He was working on some game, and I saw some of my stuff in his years ago. This is years ago. So it's just great to see that, and so always fun.
Yeah, for me too. Yeah, the same for the Colossal Cave. I also saw there's some nature assets. Yeah, from Asset Store, but that was also Knights of Honor 2. Yeah, the game, the first part I played when I was quite young, and now they released the game, and there's quite a lot of natures and river stuff there from art packs.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, even if they replace
that's the problem with being a programmer, guys. Like, I'm looking at the pictures, I can't scan my code in there. It's sad.
You can always check the code.
True. I have decompiled quite a few games on my Steam library.
Yeah, exactly. I also check the games I'm almost. I know what the assets are using. I'm sometimes checking how they are using my assets and my code in there.
It's especially pretty cool with DLLs with Unity, because you can literally just say, like I use a tool called Search Everything. I can just type star.dll, see every DLL on my machine, and then go, oh, there's Rewired. Which games are using Rewired? And I can just go in and see which ones. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, minimize that. Oh, that's very cool. I linked that Humble Bundle down below too in the description, so it's in there and in chat, and we'll get the Discord link. Let's put that into chat.
Perfect.
And in the description as well. I'll find that description link again real quick. There we go. Add Andrew's Discord, and I've got Jason Story's Discord down there as well.
Yeah, if you want conversation, join that one.
Yeah, if people are curious too, because I've been asked this a few times. The Discord is private. There is not a link directly to the Discord. It's basically any donation at all on the Ko-fi page will get you access to the Discord. I like to gate too many people joining, because I like to have actual long conversations in Discord. So if you join Ko-fi and you connect your Discord to it, you will get access to the Discord and you can join that way. So that's why there's not a direct Discord link.
Yeah, but it's a good Discord server. Definitely worthwhile. Oh, and it looks like everybody's got a Discord server. Let's pop this one up too. Nature Manufactured Discord server.
Of
as well.
course, most of our support goes to Discord.
Nice. I'm gonna put this one in the chat as well. That's how they'll all be in the ones going forward. There we go. All right. Well, I guess we'll start wrapping stuff up. I want to say thanks everybody for coming out and joining us live. Be back again probably next week. I'm still trying to figure out a long-term schedule for stuff. I think it might be nice to move it back to Sundays, but let's see.
So next,
go ahead.
will next week be the Christmas theme?
Yeah, I think so, because the next one after that is Christmas. So we'll have to do a Christmas show next week. Maybe we'll just do it at the same time or figure out the schedule soon. But I'd like to get that kind of done.
Well, you should remind me then. I will be happy to provide a free gift to somebody who does something. We'll have to think of some way to give out a free asset gift from Infinity PBR. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
We'll do gift giving.
Do a Christmas theme to give away.
Yeah, we'll need to find some way of giving it out. I don't know if we'll still use the battler, if there's a better way. There could be a better way, a more fun way,
a more Christmassy way. We need a quiz where people can answer questions.
Ooh, that could be
whoever
fun.
Gets the most questions right wins.
That would be fun. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah,
it sounds like a fun project. I don't have time to make, but I want.
Me too.
Add it to the long list of projects to someday get around to.
Yeah. Got quite a few of those going on now, but actually one that'll hopefully come out next week, so should be a lot of fun. As somebody said, I'll make a great Santa. I do have a way too big of a beard, so maybe I won't shave for next week. I was planning on fixing this down, but maybe I'll just grow it out even bigger, and we'll do an asset giveaway day instead.
Yeah, and you need to dress up as Santa Claus.
Somebody asked if we have a link to videos to introduce people to new programmers to Logic. I would just go check out my YouTube channel. Got a couple beginner videos. Actually did a brand new one to kind of go over that kind of stuff. My mouse is frozen again, so we're just going to sit here and hang out. I think I'm out of stuff to say, though. So I guess just like, subscribe, share, and go check out all of the links in the description. Go join the Discords, and we'll see you again next week. But it's going to take a minute or two for me to close this out because I got to move my mouse again. So if you guys want to say anything, now's your chance.
Goodbye. Thanks.
Goodbye.
Have a great
Thanks
day.
Both.
No, you're supposed to say, go grab my Humble Bundle.
Well, they already grabbed the Humble Bundle because this is a group of very smart people.
Oh, they already got it?
Yeah, that's obvious, right?
That's a very fair point. All right, see y'all in the next one. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Good luck, everyone.